Scott, there's been a lot of mergers and acquisitions in the agency business. We see agents now seem to jump ship on a daily basis. How have you been able to remain independent and the largest sports agency in the world?
Well, our philosophy is based upon what I believe when I was a player was in the best interest of a player. And that is that if you have hedge funds or you have capital interests that are governing the conduct of what is in the best interest of an athlete, you're going to have conflict, and you're also going to have something that I think is what the principle we're trying to sustain, and that is we want the best for the athlete and his career and his time. That may mean turning down a multi-year contract. It may be delaying or advising the athlete to not sign at a particular time. It may not fit the revenue streams of the agency. It may not fit that of the return on investment that ownership of capital investors require, the boards. So our policy was that everything has to be paid for, no debt, as we grow this company, that we're not going to be in a position where outside interests are going to control the best interests of the athlete.
What were some of the particular experiences you went through as a player that helped shape your philosophy of running Boras Corp?
Well, you saw great players being advised to do things that, in my mind, were for the interest of the agents or the agency. For example, the risk factors of this game need to be calculated. Athletes need to have a great deal of information. It's easy to see dollars given, and here's millions of dollars. If you don't take this contract, you're running a risk of injury, malperformance, and other such. That's easy. That's what everybody says. The question is that the player's value? And what is his value in a time frame? What exactly is his risk of injury considering his body type, his performance levels, the position he plays, the time that he plays in the game, what his talents are worth relative to the market in totality? And that process is one that requires a great deal of study, research, information, and risk-taking. But the goal of the concept is the person that needs to make that decision is not the agent or the agency or the owners for their particular purpose. That the goal is that the athlete can make an informed decision, that he himself decides what is best for him. And you can have situations. I had a situation a couple of years ago where I advised a player to turn down a contract that would have returned millions of dollars in revenues to our company. And the reason was it was not the player's market value. And that player left our company 3 months later, and we received nothing. Cost our company millions of dollars. But the fact of the matter was, I did not want that player to sign a bad contract. I did not want him to take a contract that was less of his value. And in fact, the player did get dramatically more in value. And the truth of the matter was that we served the player even though we had no benefit from it. From a business perspective, as an owner, and from a standpoint of investors, that would be something that would probably end a relationship with an employee. But as an owner of a company, it is something that propels us because we stand by the credo that we're always going to do what's best for the athlete.
Where did you come up with the concept of all these different factors and types of data and information that you needed and were required to show what the fair market value of a player is?
Well, I think there's two aspects of this job that are very, very important. One is understanding the value of a player in the spectrum of performance by league standard. You have to go, and I go to a ballpark every night. I watch every team play at least 10 times live. I observe the league. You scout the league. You evaluate the talent. So when you're talking with owners or talking with general managers, they know you know. They know you're involved. They know you're studied. So you have to know, because players change from month to month, year to year. You have to know that value, and there's a constant appraisal that needs to be made about each particular role of a player and of the team, what their needs are. And then you have the aspect of the legal perspective of the negotiation, about how you strategize with your client, how you talk with ownership about their needs, when is the best timing for that player to enter market or defer from being in a market. And those decisions require the base point of knowledge of the player, his goals, his individual needs on a personal level, and then knowledge of the player from who he is as an athlete and what position he plays, what the value of his performance is relative to other talents that are available. There are often times where you have a player who plays a position and he's a good player, he's not a great player, but he's going to receive a great salary because there aren't any good players at that position. And then there are times when you have great players who are available, and there's a number of great players that are available, where they may potentially get less value because there is a supply of great players at that position. So knowing strategically when to time that, looking at that in windows 2, 3, 4 years, 5 years down the road, as you begin to advise athletes, you can see that their skill set and their decision making encompasses a large volume of information about themselves, the league, the economic structure, the rights structure, so that they can really make an informed decision.
In the mid-'80s, you started hiring statisticians and economists and started bringing in a lot of non-baseball people, if you will, to build up this database. Was this a big risk? Were people thinking that, hey, Scott, you're nuts, you're expanding money on the wrong resources at that time?
Well, the process for me was always, I studied medicine when I was in undergrad and graduate school. And I'd always revert to the studies. And the thing about medicine is that it's not a pure science. It's not absolute. It's about percentages. And then you're sitting there and you're trying to figure out every way as a baseball player. How can I hit 300, when I'm in A-ball or I'm in AA? And I'm, where can I go get more information about my approach as a player? So you're fighting to try to be a major leaguer as a player, or you're fighting in the classroom to determine what it is you can do to advance yourself in being able to respond to questions and get the grades that you need to achieve the academic status you particularly strive for. In either pursuit, it always involved in my mind, a very strategic understanding of experts, of information, probabilities, likelihood of success, about why you learn not to swing hard and why you learn to take the same swing, that you have to practice in the same manner that you play and not to let your emotions get to you when you play. Those things create a probability of success by you experiencing when you want to do more in a key situation, and then all of a sudden you study the data and say, no, when I'm calm and relaxed and myself, I'm actually better. That allows you then to control that emotion through the use of information. And so largely what we do in our practice area with players is that our database and the use of it is largely in place to help them execute their goals and their contracts and achieve what they can do by understanding themselves. And you go to a player and you talk about self-understanding. If you don't have data on the table, you don't want to get it into a situation where he is not looking at something empirical. You want it to be where he's looking at facts. And that way what you have to say has an objective rather than subjective point of view to him. And you get more of an understanding and more execution from the player by having that data.
How much time do you spend looking at this data?
Oh, for example, every time that we have players that are doing well, and we have players that are not doing well in the major leagues. They're in that slump, that funk zone that they go through. What the game gives you, the game does that to no matter how great a player you are. And I go back and I find great players all the time, and I say, they're doing what you're doing. They're not performing well for a period of time. And then I make sure that I have identifiable figures that are most like them. If you're a power hitter, If you're a contact hitter, if you're a speed player, if you're a catcher, and you're struggling with your offense or your defense, I make sure that we use historical comparisons to really illustrate to the athlete, you're not the first player of your skill set to have this happen to you. That's a relief. You see it in their eyes. Oh. And then all of a sudden you realize that all the fingers are not pointed at you, that it's more about surviving the game and being persistent with the game and going to the ballpark with an attitude about how you can drive through this and what you can do to be most successful, how you can limit this, because they're coming. Slumps are coming no matter who you are. And the question, of course, is how do you create that consistently? And using that model of probabilities, successes, emotional management, all those things we give to an athlete, he can then say, there's a logic to this. There's a reality to it. It's not just doesn't apply to me, it applies to every player, or every player, most players like me. And it gives him an understanding that it is not him. It is really about how he approaches what the game brings to everybody.
What do you feel you've built here at Boras Corp now with the 4 divisions that you have, the marketing, the agency, the training, and the money advisory, and how do they all work together?
I think the most part, when you sit down, I always try to look at the other side. I'd look at the player side and the owner side. Is that every player wants to be successful. He wants to achieve his goals. And every owner wants to, when they contract with a player, they want to have contract execution. And the best thing I can do when I sit down with ownership, and the best thing I can do for this game that has given me everything I have in life has come from baseball. So I always feel that we as a group of people, all the people I hire, myself included, we owe this game our time. We owe it because it's a privilege to make your livelihood being involved in the game of baseball. And so what do we do to make it better for the people we represent and also make it better in totality, because that helps the people we represent. And so in doing that, when you sit down, you want to make sure that contract execution, not obtaining a contract, not negotiating a contract, but the execution of the contract. And that is the most challenging, because you're taking on the game. You're taking on that mystical dynamic that's so attractive because you have to compete. You have to do something that few can do. And that's what the major leagues is about, is that you're doing something that few can do, and you're called upon to do it at the highest level, which then includes execution of your contract. And in doing that, how you make a player comfortable. If his financial world is upside down, he is distracted. And our company has a philosophy: we are not investors. Our job is to help these athletes achieve their goals and help them keep their focus and do what's best for their family and their careers. But they do need these people. So we had to set up a company that monitored the conduct of these people, so that while we're not the investors, we're going to monitor them and make sure that these people do not carry them to a place that is somewhere that would affect how they play, how they live their lives, and cause them really a focus that is such a distraction that it will affect what they do. When you get into the area of our Sport Fitness Institute, durability, once you're in the big leagues, the hardest part of the big leagues is the average career is 2.8 years. That means you either don't have enough skill or you're not durable. And the type of clients we represent are largely people that are highly skilled. But I wanted to make sure that we're having a communication level with the teams. And I also want to make sure that our players don't have the best doctors in 50 miles where that team's sitting. I want to make sure they have the best doctors in the world. And so we build a physician database. We have a medical staff that works with, and we give this information to the teams readily. And we work together. And they talk about teams and representation, they're not together. I view it as like 97% of the time we're on the same team. We're trying to get contract execution. We're trying to grow this player into being what they want him to be and largely what we want him to be. And so we work together to do that. And certainly by having, and we don't charge the players for this. We spend millions of dollars a year having our own training staff. We have studies, we have medical assistance where we're communicating with the player about his ills, communicating with the team's trainers, doing all that so we can optimize the durability of the player and also improve the player so that he can take on the game. Because your body changes when you're a rookie versus when you're a 15 or 20-year veteran. And you have to know what to do in the season, how you train. When do you train heavy? When do you train light? You have to know what to do in the off season. So we want to make sure the teams are aware of this and that the players are aware of it, and we have optimal information of the players so he can increase his durability. And if we have players of experience in the league, the most experienced players and the most durable players who have that skill level, that increases the interest in the game because those players are performing at the highest levels of Major League Baseball, and fans love to see that. When you're looking at marketing, we make sure that marketing becomes something that does not, rule one is it will not interfere with the player's performance, his commitment to his team, the execution of his contract, and to his goals. We think marketing is a wonderful thing, and it can be great for particular players and enjoyable. But the reality of it is a marketing team on the outside, we found, they need to make money. They really need to make money, and they're going to put time in and the people that pay them are corporations and outside interest. And so the connections, their network is the outside, not the inside. We converted that where the concerns are the athletes. We don't want him getting back at 3 o'clock in the morning and having to do a commercial shoot at 9 or at 8 p.m. in the morning without sleep and have to play a game that night. Corporations may not like that. The executive wants to come to his home and meet with him, or they want to have him at events prior to the start of a game, and that interferes with his preparation process. So we developed our own internal marketing structure where we're there and with the athletes and provide comfort for them and protection for them, and hopefully we certainly have done a great job of doing record marketing contracts for our clients. And explaining the needs of the player to the corporate sponsorship with the understanding that our goal is protection of the player rather than making money from the player in the marketing arena. And certainly when you get into the baseball aspects of this, it all goes back to being a player. Is that you wake up every day, no matter what you did the day before, you have to have that feeling that this game is here to get you. It's coming. The game is going to try to beat you today. And so what you do with your resources, the best database, we spend millions of dollars in our database, the staffing. We have people here from the highest institutions in the land. Guys here have got perfect SAT scores, things that yours truly has never accomplished.
Me neither.
and these men are really, really expert at what they do. And we have an arbitration team, a free agent team. We have an amateur youth and scouting system that's composed of former major league players. We have people all over the world. So when I can tell you the best player in Taiwan is this player, Korea is here, Japan is here, Venezuela, Panama, Puerto Rico, we have employees there. So we know who the best players in the world are. And we know what's coming, because that affects our major leaguers. Because a team would say, is this person replaceable? I get to go to an owner and say, I have information from all over the world that the next time you're going to see an athlete like this may be 15 years from now. And that helps him with his network decisions, because he may have a player that is extraordinary and it may be meaningful, and then he can add that to his decision making to know that these types of players don't come along every 10 years. They may not come along every 30 to 50 years.
Mike Ilitch, the owner of the Detroit Tigers, has said, you know more about the Detroit Tigers than he does. Yet there's this sort of combative relationship out in the public that people perceive between super agents and baseball team owners that I don't think really exists. Do these owners come to you and say, can we ask you what your data is saying? Do you have ideas about how we can build a better roster?
Absolutely. We encourage it because we want, we represent players. They employ players. This union is a cooperative venture to get performance at the highest levels. And that dynamic is something that we have psychologists on our staff. We do everything we can to invest in the player, commit to the player, to make sure that his skill is getting on the field. And I want owners to know that because no one else does it, because it's the hedge fund owners or the corporate owners that go. The reason, people have come to us and said, here's hundreds of millions of dollars, buy this company. And I said, I'm not sitting across from a parent and a player and selling him so I can make money. Now, granted, it's been done, and we've even had agents go in and become owners. They use the money of selling the player to become an owner. That's not something philosophically I would ever do, because I don't serve the game that way. We've had opportunities to be in management, to come into an organization, to be part of ownership, do these things. That's not why I came into this. I came into it because baseball is giving us everything we have, and our principles have proved our point. We didn't sell the company. We didn't let the hedge funds or the financial companies come in and buy us or our players. We stayed true to our credo of we're doing what's best for the players, and we think that's best for baseball. And in relationships with owners, they know that now. They've seen time operate. They know that the money aspect of this is not the venture. The venture is our commitment to players, our respect for players, our respect for teams, fans, and the game itself. So when they call, we have this bounty of information that we will readily give them. We don't charge consulting fees. We want them to know this is what we see for your particular franchise. I've gone to owners and with the consent of my clients and say, my client isn't coming to your franchise because you're going to lose for 3 or 4 years. And they go, do you think it will go on that long? I go, the most important thing, the player thinks that. Secondarily, we clearly think that for these reasons. What can you do? Then they would ask, Jen, what's your concept of what we can shorten that period of time? What can we do to do that? And then we add in about any information that we have about the marketplace, the players available, why our clients think a particular way about their teams, and such, so they can make their franchises more successful. And certainly the owners who've done that, we've had 4 or 5, 6 of them in the last, decade or so. They've been in the playoffs. They've been in the World Series. They've won, which was their objective, and largely in part because I think they invested with our players, the right players, and then they've, I think, taken information and they've executed it very well, like any business owner would do. Collect information, determine what's best for you, and certainly they have to make that decision. And certainly there's a lot of other information other than ours, but we're an additive process, and that's really how our relationships work with teams. It's not at all adversarial. It is something that is very informational, very much a business practice, and our doors are open. We're up late at nights. They know where we're at, watching the games all the time, and they also know when they call they're going to get current information and an informed response to their questions.
Have you ever had to turn a player down that you had under contract and this player wanted to continue the relationship with Boras, Corp, signed another contract, but did not? You turned them down because you felt, going back to what you mentioned, execution, that this player did not execute in the way that you felt was in the best interest of Boras, Corp, and baseball?
Well, any player that we make a commitment to, we honor that commitment. If he gets injured or he is not the talent that we thought he was, and I don't care if we have to find him independent ball contracts, we honor the commitment we make. Now, if there is an aspect of the player's character or something that he's done that we have agreed prior to our relationship that would allow us to certainly in that relationship. Only then would we tell a player that we're not going to continue. And we always tell players that you should be the one that lets the public know that you're no longer continuing a relationship with us. But those situations are rare. For the most part, our job is that we work until we're told not to work, and we really advance our commitment as best we can for the player. But the idea of it is we want every parent and we want every player to know that when we come and we've selected you, it is a process that is a heavy filter. We're very selective about who we choose to represent. And the reason is that we have a lot of data and metrics and algorithms that say a lot of players who are really good players in their hometown and in their region, we understand why they're not going to be successful in the major leagues. And we do our best to let them know why we're not representing them and why they should go to school and get a degree, and then take a chance. Certainly after they graduate from college, we're all for them taking their chance in baseball, and let baseball be a platform for them as it was for myself, in a very different way, where you got hurt and you didn't achieve what you wanted to achieve at the major league level, but you certainly were able to use your familiarity and association with the game to advance in other areas.
Can you take me through what it took to get the Max Scherzer deal done with the Washington Nationals? He was a free agent, obviously, a huge deal for a pitcher. And then contrast that with the first Bryce Harper deal, because I think from different angles, they show how Boras Corp is integrated, because you had a guy just was a sophomore in high school, and then another guy who had already proven what he could do with the Detroit Tigers.
Well, Max Scherzer he's just frankly a remarkable person who happens to be an athlete. And because whatever Max did or will do in life, he is going to take an attitude where he is going to compete, he is going to prepare, he's going to do things that allow him to be optimal. And it's so pleasant to walk into a room with ownership and get to talk about Max as a person, because you've seen him ever since he was in college and how he has aspired to learn. You know, he came with a great fastball, but the reason Max is so successful is his learning aptitude taught him the slider, the changeup, the breaking ball. And as each one developed, he got better, but he didn't stop. He kept adding the pitches. And even the day he signed his record contract, he told me on the way to the airport he's working on another pitch. And the idea of having someone on your team who's a great teammate, who is someone who's earnestly interested in the outcomes of what his teammates do in their careers, he is grandly interested in winning and achieving the goals of the ownership and is respectful of that. You start with that, and then you put in his talent, and all of a sudden you realize that the value of that is something that only a small group of teams can afford.
How did you discover Bryce Harper?
I got a call from Kurt Stillwell, who's a former major leaguer, and he works in our amateur division and is a key part of our success in evaluating young players. And Kurt called me on the phone one day, and I was at a major league game, and he goes, "Look, I need you to come over to Las Vegas and see this player." And I said, "Well, great, tell me about him." He goes, "Well, I need to tell you something." And I go, "What's that?" And he goes, "Well, he's 15 years old." And I said, "What? He's 15? And of course, in my history, some of the greatest players I've represented, I've seen play at 17, 18, and a very few 16 and below. And knowing Kurt's acumen and being a major league player, and he goes, "I don't want to say it before you get here, but I need you to come so I can say it to you personally after you watch him." So he came and we watched Bryce play, and fortunately for me, Bryce hit a ball that in center field as a freshman in high school was something you rarely would see a senior hit in high school. And I told him, best power I've ever seen at 15. And he looked at me, he goes, good, I'm glad to hear that, because you've been doing this a lot longer than I have, and it's clearly the best power that I've seen at any young age. And we met with Ron and Sherry's parents, and I went home that night, and it was created, I didn't sleep, and I realized I'm going to have to create something completely different for this precocious athlete, because Bryce is an is player. You don't have to say a word, you just look at it, and you know it is. And when you watch his at-bats in the big leagues, I go to ballparks and I look around, he's one of those few players that when he comes to bat, people look and they stop and they know that it is. And we had to develop a plan where he had to take his GRE so he could leave high school, because we had draft rules that were going to be an issue, be changed, and we were going to put a ceiling on the draft rules, which would have dramatically lessened his value. And I said, I'm not sure you're going to see your junior prom, or clearly not your senior prom, and do you want to do this? And this is where your son's abilities is at. And collectively, the Harper family took that advice, and he left high school and went to junior college at an age where he should have been a junior in high school. And ironically, he hit 27 home runs with a wood bat and became the Golden Spikes Award winner, which is like the Heisman Trophy for college baseball, and as a junior college player, and then became the first pick in the draft. So it says a lot about that relationship with families and parents and a player, where you come in and you're asking them to do something that's never been done before, and then he executes it. I mean, he went and took a GRE without ever having the class work, the background to do it, because normally people are taking this after they've taken some sort of high school equivalency exams. He's not had any of that, and he passed that test, which tells you a lot about Bryce Harper, his intellect, and his physical skill, and then goes out and executes at the highest level with college athletes that are 3 and 4 years older than him.
Both with Bryce Harper and Max Scherzer, did you show them, tap into your incredible database here and your analytics, and use that to explain to them why what you thought would be in their best interest was probably in their best interest?
Well, yes, for Max, this is like, it'd be the equivalent of really transferring data from our computer to his computer, which is frankly in his head. So he sits there, and I had literally a 5.5-hour presentation. I asked him 5 times, you want me to stop? I'll come back. No, 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 no. Photographic memory, remembered everything. And at the end of the meeting was prepared to make a decision to direct me to turn down the largest free agent contract, which the Detroit Tigers offered him, which is $144 million. And we developed this plan with risk analysis and insurance policies and all these things, where basically it came down to him relying on his performance levels, what he could do, how he could do it. And he didn't bat an eye. He made the decision. And when I walk out of the room, normally our job is to make the player feel confident. And I left the room feeling far more confident about what decision he had, because he knew what he could do with his performance and with his skills, and it made me feel like he clearly had made the right decision. And in a matter of 6 months, he got to a team that gives him a chance to win, and made literally $70 million more by taking advantage of all of his assets as a person and player to optimize his market and help him achieve his goals.
The business of baseball has changed so much the last couple of decades, with regional sports networks, teams owning their own RSNs, teams getting, like the Cubs, getting involved in real estate development, other teams getting concession businesses and so forth. How has the evolution of the business of baseball tied into the evolution of Boras Corp?
Well, our job is to certainly take an athletic performance and the person you represent and who he is, and take that to an owner and say, what are the faculties of your ownership that are enhanced by this player? Because we've demonstrated many times that a particular player will increase the RSN ratings. What does that mean in advertising sponsorship, or if you want to sell a portion of the RSN? And so, or what does it mean to you in franchise value? What about the property around the stadium and the fact that you now are viewed as a different type of team, a winning team, and what that means to a retail space that you could purchase the land and build knowing you're going to have this type of team for a 4 to 7 year window. So all these things, because remember the thing about sport is that it is never a constant, but you're always trying to make it such. You know that winning is for a period of time. You don't go out and say, I'm going to win 20 years in a row. You come out and say that the probabilities of that are nil. So consistency in sport is how to effectuate a moment. It's not how to produce a product that is without its ebbs and flows. So in doing that, you're trying to create a consistency that is not the ultimate goal, but a consistency that allows the probability for the ultimate goal to happen over a time frame. And when you go through the algorithms and ask an owner what his goals are based upon, and these are men primarily who are highly successful and knowledgeable about another area which allowed him to generate the revenues to purchase this. You have to sit down and say, what can you tell us about your goals in this business that's going to allow you to achieve that primary? And for some owners, it's maybe getting back to 500. For others, it's building a great developmental system so they can grab 4 years from now a window where the probability of them winning, being successful, is 100% higher than it is for them being at the low end of the league. So all these things depend on the franchise, the owner, but certainly creating ideas with them, synergizing with them about how they not only use the winning and losing part, but how they generate revenues, franchise values, property management, rights structure, international behavior, all these elements, looking at their market of who their fan base is, where their fan base is locating, what type of athlete are they most attracted to. All this information goes into, I think, the keys for their consideration of what decisions they want to make.
You were the one that first discovered how underpaid players in the amateur draft were. And, I mean, that's really what got your business booming in the early to mid 80s. What convinced you that that was the case?
Oh, I went and I remember I was in the Cardinal organization and this athlete came through. His name was Gary Templeton. And he was their first round pick. And Tempe learned how to switch hit in 3 weeks. And it was the classic thing, what can I do better than him? And in about 10 days, I figured out that would be not much. And the reality of it was I started looking at his value because there was no one like him. And he went on to have a 17-year major league career. But in my mind, I'm saying, why is he getting such a low value when other players are getting values near him which are nowhere near as good? So I realized that the star draft player, which needs to be separated from the other drafted players, because the phenomena of saying 98% of the draft picks have, dramatically different value than the 1 or 2%, that's true. It's probably bad business for teams to invest a lot of money in 98% of the draft. But for those select few, the amount of worth and value that they have to teams, it should be absolutely separated from everyone else. Then the question is, how do you define that? And the answer is, it's really easy when they're that good. But the system doesn't allow for the separation economically. It never did. And so consequently, we went and built a market for those unique players. And I think that every player that we've had who's been given a bonus over $5 million, they've gone on to be all-stars, great successes. All the math has proved true that these players are worth millions and millions of dollars to owner, even though they only had to spend a few million more to attract them and purchase them.
Was the evidence that you were right even proven more by guys that came out of the draft that you got big deals for that were, let's say, second, third, or fourth round picks?
Well, the thing is, it wasn't where they're drafted, because the draft in baseball is not a talent-driven draft. It is an economic structure. Because if there was no cap on this draft, then a true draft will happen, because if teams could trade players, only then will it be a talent-driven draft. Because the team will always draft the best player, even though they can't sign him, and then trade him. So the best player then becomes a commodity of the team, the best talent. Until they do that, you're never going to have a draft that's true in baseball. In other sports, you can trade picks. You can do that. And so the best talent has a value, even though you may not want to spend that much to sign him. You may want to trade that value and get other major leaguers or other minor leaguers in return. It still has a value. So with these artificial systems, until they truly create that rule where value, the player's skill is related to his true value, you're going to have this artificial behavior that occurs in the draft market.
Given the current CBA, which was obviously different from when you started Boras Corp, could you have gotten off to as fast a start with your company today, given the current CBA, as you did then?
Well, again, under the rules, we've identified the best players, and we've gotten the highest bonuses allowed in this structure. But the magnitude of it isn't anywhere near the true value. In Chicago, I've got Abreu and I've got Bryant. And here's a player who, was a fine player in Abreu, and he lives in a foreign jurisdiction. He gets $70 million, and Bryant gets $7 million. When you have that dynamic going on, you can see that the face of the rules is creating value, not the talent. And we don't want American boys suffering for baseball's concocting rules where foreign jurisdictions get to take advantage of a system that is not, it should be balanced for American players and for foreign jurisdictions. And until we create that rule where you can trade draft picks, only then will the truest form of value come to the teams, and that is you should only pay for skill, talent. You should only invest in that. And systems should not be a detriment to that truth happening, because the scouting is good, the game has a real clear expertise in evaluating that skill. The problem is the system interrupts it, and we have to do a better job of creating systems that allow the truth of that market to hit, because it's really, really eventful for teams and for advancing this game.
What other changes would you like to see? The current CBA ends, I think the last year's 2016. For the betterment of baseball, you mentioned a couple of things, but what would be the top 4 or 5 priorities you've had to improve the CBA?
Well, certainly I think we have to adjust a number of things that relate to what we do with the relationships with all 30 teams. This is something where in the 90s we approached this with revenue sharing. Well, revenue sharing is tremendous, except now we developed a system where owners bought teams. They remained in last place. They took the revenue sharing money, and they basically spent that money to operate the team, didn't improve it. And then they sold the team knowing they didn't spend money for 4 or 5 years to operate it, and they made, at the time, $200 and $300 million, and now $800 and $900 million, because the franchises are in the billions now. So we have to create a system where revenue sharing is necessary so that there's parity in the league, and the successes of a franchise, and that doesn't mean an owner comes in and buys the lowest hanging fruit of a franchise and spends $1 billion, well, somebody else is spending $3 billion and he's going to get the same value. He shouldn't. But the reality of it is he should have the right to use his intellect and create a competitive team and use those resources. So, and be compelled to use those resources, because my attitude is, you don't get revenue, you get to use revenue sharing, but when you sell the team, you have to give it back if you're not successful. Players have gradients to measure success. So should owners, particularly incoming owners. So if you're coming into baseball and you don't contribute to it, and you don't contribute to winning and benefiting the game, you don't get to use the money that comes primarily from the successful ownerships, the major market teams. You don't get to use that money to operate these teams for 7 or 8 years and then sell it and make hundreds of millions of dollars and not contribute to the game. So that is something that's really more on the ownership side. The revenue sharing commitments, how when they're required, if they take revenue sharing, then on sale of the team, they must give that revenue sharing money back if it's deemed by these standards or gradients that you've not been successful. Then I think ownership and the commitment to the game, when they purchase these franchises, the owners coming in will realize that they do have to invest. They have to use their own money rather than the system's money to operate the team. I think from a perspective of what we do, from the last collective bargaining agreement, we've made some fundamental mistakes. We've got to make sure that players who spend 6 years in the major leagues, and they're one of the few group, that small 15% that ever make it. And mind you, less than 1% of the players who sign pro contracts ever spend 6 years in the major leagues. But those who are actually in the big leagues and they make it to free agency, that right structure is meaningful and that all clubs have access to it. It does not cost them draft picks. That they can improve their team at the major league level and also improve their team at the draft level, and give them that opportunity to do that rather than the current rules that we have that require you to give away draft picks to sign free agents. That's not in the best interest of baseball, because a lot of mid-level teams cannot give up their draft, which is hugely important to them, to help their major league team. And yet the fans in that area want them to do both, grow and help the big league team. So we want to create a system where you can continue to develop and you continue to have the best major league team all in one. And I think we can certainly manufacture a system that does that. And I think the other aspect of it is our entry-level system, the draft, and many of the things we spoke about, is that we have got to make sure that American players, the greatest athletes in America that are subject to the draft, have every incentive to come to this game. If you are Bryce Harper, you're worth something very, very different than a lot of other draft picks, all other draft picks, other than a select few. We want to reward those players for that. Why? Because that's an incentive for that 12-year-old, 13-year-old to come and attempt to be that player. They may not be, but that incentive is there. And then we document that. And we have foreign jurisdictions receiving 60 and 70 million. Now we know what? Players who are unproven in the big leagues, who have never played here, are receiving, in advance of performance, $60 and $70 million. Why not do that for a select few American boys, since you've already done it for players from a foreign jurisdiction? So once we accomplish those dynamics, I think from a strategic standpoint of the game, we've got to make sure that our greatest product, which is the World Series, becomes something very different than what it is now, a regional battle. Because we want to make sure that this becomes something of a national pride, a national exposure. And a big part of this is that when you have the World Series, you can get to, or you have the Super Bowl, every media person in the world can get to that venue a year in advance because they know where it's going to be. And I believe that we need a World Series where you know where it's going to be in advance. The fans in the regional area can watch all of the games that lead up to the World Series in their home markets, you know, the playoffs, the divisional series, the wild cards. They can do that, but we also have this neutral site annually that we can bring the World Series to and have a true World Series week where people from all over the world come, they camp. It's in one place, they know in advance, the hotels, the restaurants, everyone there, all the all the things that we do in the All-Star game can be just magnified, because our All-Star game is the best. The reason is because we know where it's going to be a year in advance. So I think we have to really look at that to make the World Series something that it should be, because it's really it's a tremendous event.
Scott, what do you think normalized relations with Cuba, if that works out, could mean for baseball?
Well, look, we want the major leagues to be the best talent in the world. We don't want to, no doors should be closed. And if you've got Cuban players, no different than Venezuelan players or Dominican players or Japanese players or Taiwanese players, wherever the game is played, you want the fan base to know that this sport isn't the best in the United States. It's the best in the world. And that's what's made Major League Baseball something that when fans go to it, they know that no other brand of this game is played at a higher level. So anything that advances the competition, the talent, and certainly the player pool certainly enhances Major League Baseball.
Now, I don't imagine that you, by any means, would have data already on the Cuban market, but do you think that if relations are normalized and Cuban players come here, they could have the type of impact that Japanese and Korean players have?
Well, I've had the good fortune to represent 3 of the top Korean players who've done well here, Chan-ho Park or Sin-Soo Choo, or Ryu with the Dodgers, who've done remarkably well here. The truth of the matter is, for Korea having 80 million people, and even though they do have a professional league, you've seen a lot more players come from really the Latin American markets than you have from the Japanese market or the Korean market or the Taiwanese markets. And the reason I think for that is the fact that we're still ramping up there about how we teach young athletes, how they condition, what they do, and the volume of players that actually play baseball there. In the Latin markets, these players their culture is they're playing baseball at 8, 9 years old, and that's what they do all day long. And so there's been, almost in the 25 percentile of their evolution from the Latin American countries coming here to the major leagues. So as we go into this, we have China, we have a lot of new markets that certainly are going to have strong lower halves, cores. They're going to be great baseball players if they're indoctrinated into youth baseball, and that brings forward but remember, in the Latin American markets, they've been coming here, since the 50s, and some instances 40s. And so they have multiple generations that have created this volume of talent. And until we have that in the Pacific Rim, I don't think we're going to see the volume that we've seen there.
What are you most proud of in terms of the impact you've had on baseball?
What I'm most proud of is that you have the privilege of working for men who are the best at what they do in a game you love. And also the privilege of being able to work with people for, 15, 20, and hopefully 35, 40 years that you used to represent, and they've come into your company, and you go in and you get to watch their careers grow, and you get to work with people you've known since they were teenagers, and that is it's a special feeling to work with someone for that long and all do it in the dynamic of the game. And the other aspect for me is that the privilege of sitting at a major league field right close to that grass. You smell the dirt, you smell the grass, you hear the pop of the glove, crack of the bat. To be able to experience that every day, when I was a kid working on a farm, and you had to work and get all your chores done, because at 5 o'clock, if you didn't, as 5 o'clock came, that's when you got to go play ball. And now in my life, every day at 5 o'clock, I'm at that field. So that to me is a great privilege.
And to the average fan who really doesn't know what a super agent does on a daily basis, if you wanted to tell them, how would you finish this sentence? Scott Boras changed baseball by.
representing his clients well.
Pete Carroll, the coach of the Seattle Seahawks, was your college roommate. Has he ever whispered in your ear, you know, you should be an agent for football players? Have you ever been tempted to be an agent for another sport?
Yeah, we've had quite a few laughs about the subject because I always tell them, I go, I don't want to be involved with the easy sport. I said, "Hey, you only have to play once a week." I go, our players have to deal with the game every day, and so it's the kind of thing where I would be doing a disservice to the game I love and the players I represent if I was involved in another sport. That's how I feel. Philosophically, we have to do everything we can 24/7 to advance the interests of our clients and the game that we love. And to be involved with something else and to know a whole new sport, to know a whole new group of players, to know a whole new market, all the new general managers, all the new owners, to advance that would take away from all the commitments that you feel you have to your clients and the players. So for me, I've had many, many athletes come in from other sports, star players, and a wide variety of other people who want you to negotiate other things, you know, the price for steel and whatever. The point was, I always tell them the same thing. I go, my commitment and privilege is based upon a total commitment to one game, one sport. And if I'm tired of that, I'll let you know. But we don't run this like a business, because businesses come and go. We run this about a principle, and the principle is that we're going to represent baseball players. We're going to be committed to the game of baseball, and we're going to study it and learn it every day as best we can, and apply our resources to it. And we believe that commitment is going to allow us to be what we wanted to be in life, and that was someone who could go out and compete with this game and take on this game every day.
What is it about all the data, because understanding the data, I should say, that Boras Corp has, because there are many agencies that now have caught on to this thing, you need data, but they're not where you are. What enables you and your team to understand this data and look at it in a way that your competitors have not?
Well, I think the people I work with, the minds, the thought process, we have the think tank. The information comes from a variety of visions and thought processes, and the amount of data and the software that we've created, and and the speed of that data, where we can sit down and have meetings, and all of a sudden you see a little trickle of a light. And it can come from a variety of people, including myself. But you see that light, and you go, oh, that says something. Max Scherzer. One of the most important things about Max Scherzer was the pitching odometer, is that there are pitchers who are 25 years of age, because everybody wants to talk about age in sports. Well, the number of innings he had, and he was this good at 30, he had the same number of innings as a number of pitchers who were 25 and 26. What would you rather have? The miles on the car, or would you rather look at the age? And the answer is, for durability and such, for value, we really clearly understood for the first time that owners would rather look at what performance is on that body, not the age of the player. And that way they could look at durability in two ways. One, certainly by chronological age, but the other by the performance demands that he had on him. And so when you create that, you realize when you take that to the market, that had value. Because you're going, oh, I didn't realize that. I didn't look at it that way. And you create a new way of looking at how you value performance. And that gleam of light came through the process of our meetings and our studying, because what are the concerns? The concerns are durability for a pitcher. They always are. How do we measure and answer those concerns? What do we do to look at them? And how do we get the game to change in response to those concerns? Now we have young pitchers. We know that owners at 30 want less innings than more. So that means we have to go to owners and say, the reason they're saying that is because they're concerned about durability in the 30s. So it's in your interest and the player's best interest to make sure that we monitor their innings at 21 and 22 and 23, because our data says that if you're throwing a lot of innings before the age of 24, your chances of throwing many innings after the age of 30 are dramatically affected by the amount of innings you throw. So now there's a currency that occurs about, am I hurting this player by doing this? Or is this player a great young star where I can just pitch him as many innings as I want? He says he's okay, but they're never okay after they throw 1,500 innings before the age of 26. They're never okay. They never get to 30. And that's the pyramid of information that says, what's the standards? What are the boundaries? What's the credo of the game? And that's what we hope to change through representation.
What would you tell a young person now who's leaving law school and has visions of being the next Scott Boras?
You know, like any career, when I left law school, I always tell them, because I give a lot of lectures at law school, I said, by the way, my vision when I left law school, I was going to be a medical lawyer. And I played pro baseball. So to give you an idea of anybody who has a crazy vision about going into this industry, I wouldn't have that vision, because that's not how the vision arrives. What happens is that it comes to you. It comes to you because either you have an ability or such. And in my case, I had teammates, and they called me. And they illustrated to me there was a need for what I had to say and my background and what I did. And I also saw a void in the game where the game was being hurt by the fact that these great young players coming into the draft, the value of them had to be illustrated so that players would be attracted to come to baseball versus other sports, because it was artificially depressed. They needed some form of representation, and the union only represented major league players. So creating an idea, a concept, because if you're going to come to the game, you've got to figure out how you're going to beat the game. And if anyone has ideas how they can beat the game day in, day out, and advance it, and help the players that play it, then I would say the risk factors say that you might want to go into it. Otherwise, I'd say practice law for a long, long time. And then if you're successful, then you might want to do it, once you've got your family's taken care of to do it. But this is a high-risk industry, because everyone says it's about having clients. No, it's not. It's about having the right player. And the same thing is true for the teams. It's not about signing a number of players. It's about signing the right players.
If a young Scott Boras on the farm system could get a glimpse of what his life in the future would be like, what would he have thought?
You know, when you're young and you're a player, you never think about those things. You think about playing, because when you're in that batter's box and you backspin that line drive to the gap, and you're sitting there at second base, and you can do that, and a few others can't, and you turn on that 95-mile-an-hour fastball. That's all you think about. That's all you really want to do. That's what drives you, and the thrill of that, the feel of that, is never replicated when you're doing something that is so valued to you now, and to your family and the people you work with and the players you have the privilege of representing. That's a totally different feeling, and one that didn't come to me until I knew. I knew after 3 knee operations that I had to do something else. So the privilege of this light can only be evaluated after the candle of your career had been blown out as a player.